Is your wavy line okay, Andy?
Yep.
Sorry for the personal question.
My wavy line is awesome. And we are live, folks. We're live. Lauren, you're up. Bring us in.
Wait, the introduction.
Oh, you want me to do the introduction?
Yes.
This is John's show. Hey guys, welcome to John's show, live streaming, and with us is Andy Edstrom, and we are going to shill the absolute bejesus out of his book Why Buy Bitcoin, and get into some really cool conversations, hopefully around like the legacy fiat system and our past and our backgrounds in that field. And Lauren is going to ask the first question, but first of all, I'll hand over to John to introduce himself. I should say my background in the legacy fiat system was in foreign exchange, of all things, dealing dollars and yen and euros and pounds. And before that, do you remember Deutschmarks, everyone? And French francs and guilders and lira, right? Fiat does die every year. There's a fiat currency dying, and we've all been through it. We just forget. John, over to you, and thanks for hosting us, man. It's really, really cool.
Well, thank you guys for joining on this call. I've been pumped about it all day, and I'll keep the intro brief, but I can't lie and say this was my idea. I think you and Andy were passing it back and forth before I became involved, but what we uniquely share together is experience in what we not so affectionately refer to as the legacy system. And I think mine is probably the most limited out of the three of us, because I couldn't tolerate it perhaps as long as you guys could. And I got out of it rather quickly. But I thought this would be cool because, a lot of us in this space, we're often critical of the legacy system, but not so many of us have experience in it. And we're also very eager when members of the legacy system kind of have that light bulb moment and they kind of come to the orange side, as it were. And so I thought this would be fun to discuss some of our experiences and then kind of reflect on what's going on in that sector today, look at the Goldman report that came out about a month ago, and just do our thing and talk Bitcoin and see what happens. Andy, you're muted. Andy.
I guess he is muted. I think he just chose the wrong microphone thing.
Uh-oh. Did I blow it? Can you hear me?
You blew it, Andy. You friggin' blew it. We had all that time to prepare.
Amazing. Well, anyway, thank you for those kind words. I am happy to admit that I have the longest and dirtiest history here, probably among us, in the legacy financial system. In one respect, I'm still a part of it, although I've tried to move to one of the cleaner corners. But it's I haven't had the chance yet to tell some of the earlier part of my story, and I think some people may find it interesting. I hope I don't bore people, but I think it's just one man's story, or a short part of one man's story, that maybe sheds one angle or a little bit of light on some of the problems with the situation and the system overall. So thanks, guys, for making this happen.
You're welcome, man. And if you don't mind, if Lauren can ask the first question, because it's nearing bedtime and she's ready. She's good to go.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with John first, if that's okay. So my question is, when did you start podcasting?
Well, Lauren, it's weird. I've always been fascinated with kind of understanding how other people think. And the earliest example of that I can think of was I was 17 years old, and I went to Mount Everest base camp, so hiking in the Himalayas with my dad. And I brought the little camcorder. And when we got to base camp, so base camp is like where everyone gets ready to make the serious climb up to the top of Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world. And there was this German, I went around the camp looking for someone that I could interview. So, and at that time, interview just meant shove a camera in someone's face and be like, aren't you scared about going up that mountain? And I found a German guy, and I parked the camera in front of him. And I basically asked a bunch of those silly questions, like, are you scared? Did you do any training? What kind of food are you eating? And then I didn't do much of that until I was living in Shanghai in China. And there was a lot of things happening in the technology world in 2014. And I just thought, wow, this is a really cool scene. There's lots of really interesting people doing really cool work. And I thought it would be fun, again, just to kind of understand how they're thinking about things. And that's where it all started rolling for me. And then I've been a closet Bitcoin bug for many, many years. And then last year, it kind of overwhelmed me, I guess. And I couldn't help myself but kind of focus exclusively on that. So it's actually been a bit of a hobby of mine for a while, but it's only formalized in the last few years. Great question, Lauren.
Sorry, Andy, we were not talking about Bitcoin then.
That's okay. This is John's story. I'm going to tell my story. It's all good.
What was I going to say? So you started way before Daddy did.
Yeah, but he's caught up because he's so good, He's just a natural pro.
I got a good sidekick, It's
that's true, Lauren.
The people on because of me.
Lauren, I think you're carrying him a little bit, if I'm honest. People kind of tune out after you finish your questions, usually.
I have looked at the average listen length of my show, and it's about 7.5 minutes. So yeah,
just about the time Lauren signs on.
So, do you have a question for Andy now, then?
Yeah. How many people has bought your book?
Oh, good question. So the honest answer is I don't know, because most of the sales go through Amazon, and I haven't actually fully figured it. They don't have like a total units sold number. I wish they did, but it's definitely in the hundreds. I don't know if I've broken 1,000 yet copies, but I think I'm probably close to 1,000. And lately, it's been basically several copies a day. It's
nice.
It's not hundreds of copies a day, but it's also not 0 copies a day. So somebody is buying it. Hopefully some percentage of the people who buy it are actually reading it. And
learning more about Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, every time I see a sale pop up, it puts a smile on my face, because it means that someone's hearing a perspective on Bitcoin, and somebody's hopefully learning a little more. So yeah. And by the way, it sells through Apple, and it's available through Barnes and Noble and stuff too. I don't really track those sales channels. I'm actually a really terrible businessman as it relates to selling a book. I just, I like to talk about it with your dad and with John and some other podcasters, because that's fun, but I should track it more closely. But hopefully it'll be, in the thousands. It'll probably matter whether the price of Bitcoin goes up, right? Whether we get a bull market, which I think we will. But yeah, that's where it is right now.
Lauren, the big question here is, have you read Andy's book yet?
No, but I had started reading Knut's book, but I stopped that because I got if Knut's watching, no offense, I got a bit bored. and I was reading a load of other books, so I was like, I'll just leave this aside to Daddy, because he was reading well, so I just lose my page and everything. So that's a million reasons why.
Oh man.
But no, I haven't read it yet.
Can someone grab Knut?
I'm sure Andy's is next on the list, right after you work your way through Knut's.
I'll be next.
I feel like my way through 1,000 more books what I'm reading right now.
Fair enough.
She's got Human Action lined up, so it could be a while.
Yeah, well, we're all trying, Lauren. Those of us who have written books, and by the way, Knut has written 2 now, I think, and they're both great, and people should check them out. But we're all trying to find the way to write the book that'll reach, some number of people. For some people it's a longer form. Saifedean wrote a 300-page book, which is great. For some people it's shorter formats. Mine is kind of in the middle, and we all just try our best to reach a few people. So.
And Lauren, just like you,
I hope you give other Bitcoin books another shot, and Yeah.
And Lauren, like you, we're just trying to understand what this thing is and, what it means and what are the impacts and the significance of all this. We're very much learning as well.
Oh, and I still got a question for Andy on his book.
Okay, please.
Have any of your family bought the book yet?
Oh, yes, they have, actually. In fact, some of my family members have bought the book and left me, a 5-star review on Amazon. So that's been fun. And I'm sure if you look at the history of the sales, I don't know if I think I mentioned that you can sort of see that, although they don't have a total number. Yeah. There was a big order, I think, soon after I published it, and I have a suspicion that it might have been my mom that bought a bunch. She handed it out to her. She handed it out to her friends, and so yes, so family members. Some of my family members definitely have bought it, and several of them have read it, and a few have even left reviews, which suggests to me that either they actually read the book and liked it, or they just love me very much.
That's a good one. Also, go back when you said I was when I was like a terrible book designer thing.
What's
when
that?
You said like a few minutes ago, you said that he couldn't.
Oh, he was a bad book businessman.
Yeah,
because he wasn't tracking his sales.
Maybe my sister Caitlin can come and help you with that because she loves organizing stuff.
Nice, good pitch. Good job, Lauren. Taking care of family and helping connect people. Good work.
And just on that point about Andy's family, not only buying the books, but, maybe hopping on and doing some reviews. I just went to Amazon.ca, and the first review I see is from this guy. And the second review I see is the top international review from Daniel.
Okay, what do you say, Danny?
That's amazing.
I'm loving it. You guys were both early supporters. You're both great supporters, and I'm very appreciative of the kind words that you left online. So that's awesome.
Our pleasure.
That's really cool.
My pleasure.
It doesn't surprise me at all that those were the best and most popular and the first reviews that came up.
So have you finished with your questioning? Yeah. Okay. Would you say goodnight to the guys?
Yeah, that's what I was about to do.
I'll step aside then.
Good night and bye.
See you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
I'm talking to you. Oh, and sorry, John, I didn't give you that much questions than Andy.
Oh, well, next time, Lauren. I'm a little bit sad about that, but you can make it up next time.
Yeah.
There'll be another opportunity. We'll figure out a way to do every combination and permutation of, or we'll do a repeat.
Some night Lauren will just DM me for one of those random live streams. She'll be like, Dad doesn't know I'm coming on tonight.
Guard your login and your password. You're going to have other people using the Princey, the Princey login credentials.
Yeah. All right. So gents, why don't we break into the meat of this? Andy, I think you are probably the best one to get us kicked off, given your experience and the report from Goldman and that kind of stuff. So why don't you hit us with what's been on your mind?
Yeah, man. So thanks for that, John. Princey, thanks for the intro. Lauren's awesome. You're obviously letting her find her way down the path. You're giving her good leadership, but you're letting her ask questions and think for herself, which thankfully you're doing it is a rare thing in this world we live in. But John, thanks for the prompt. If you guys will humor me, I'm gonna turn on the Wayback Machine over here. It operates on a crank, which is why I have to crank it right now. So we're gonna move back. The year is 2002. It's October 2002, and a young Andy Edstrom is excited to be graduating from college the following year in 2003. And he's looking for a job. So he's interviewing, on Wall Street. And he's an econ major. He has big ideas, and he wants to make money. And he's heard that the way to learn a lot and get paid well on the way, basically learn about business, learn about the belly of the economic beast, right? Learn about the heart and the circulatory system of the economy, which is finance and Wall Street. He's heard that the way to do that is go get a job on Wall Street. Now, unfortunately for him, he's graduating into probably the worst job market in the last decade, because thanks in part to the idiotic policies of the Federal Reserve in the prior years, there has been this huge bubble in the stock market in general, but especially tech stocks, right? That was the internet bubble of the late 90s, early 2000s. And it has popped, and, basically hardly anyone on the street is hiring. Now, fortunately, we're sort of at the inflection point, and there's starting to be sort of signs of life, and there are starting to be a few job opportunities. But I can tell you that my graduating class, I can count on two hands, the total jobs in Wall Street, basically, that occurred. There's a handful of people that got hired. I consider myself, really lucky to have basically snagged a spot. And I started at a place called Rothschild. And we could spend a whole episode talking about the Rothschild family. I'm sure you guys can recommend people in terms of reading. Neil Ferguson, not the guy who's been in the news about his projections, which were dead wrong about the COVID pandemic, but the other Neil Ferguson, who writes economic history, has written some good books. Creature from Jekyll Island also covers some of the Rothschild history. Suffice to say that the Rothschild family dominated finance for a couple of centuries, prior to the last two. But I signed on with those guys. And then a year into that job, I got a call from a recruiter at Goldman. And at that time, the cycle had basically started to turn. And they were like, look, we didn't have a lot of jobs. We weren't hiring much before, but now we need people. There was, interestingly, one guy who got hired straight out of my college class to Goldman. And it just so happened that his father was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company that was probably paying Goldman, if not millions of dollars of fees per year on average, then possibly tens of millions, or in excess of 10 million a year in revenues. So it's interesting, I think, to think about how that how that system works. Not saying that the guy wasn't qualified, just that in an environment where there was only one slot to fill, he's the one that got it. But I managed to move over, and when I joined Goldman, like I said, I wanted to make money. I wanted to learn a lot. I wanted to have a platform to jump off of later. To my mind, Wall Street then was a little bit like big tech now, right? It was the establishment. It was the way to get tons of experience, basically be working in some of the dominant firms in the whole economy. So in that sense, the ball has shifted, or things have moved, in the intervening, whatever it is, 17 years, but a similar dynamic. But one of the things that I discovered at Goldman soon after I joined was the hierarchy. And the top of the pyramid, right, at Goldman is the partner level. So when I joined, it was estimated that roughly 2% of employees at Goldman were partner level. Partner was the top. These guys tended to be running a department or running a group within a department. And at the time I joined, the story was that the average annual compensation for a partner at Goldman was about $8 million. $8 million a year, average comp for the top 2% of the firm. Needless to say, people competed pretty hard to get those spots. I was just a lowly analyst. Okay. I was in the front office. So I was, on the track that could eventually potentially lead, to that level, if I was lucky enough and ruthless enough and smart enough and willing to work, 80 hours a week, basically, for 10 or 15 years of my life. And so that was the top echelon. And what I noticed, it took a little while, but probably within a year, what I realized was this job of partner was interesting, and it had some strange elements. And the one strange thing was these guys seemed to spend probably the majority of their time managing conflicts of interest. And I'm going to say in quotation marks, managing conflicts of interest. Okay, so what did that mean? So if you're making $8 million a year on average at Goldman, your job is not to bring in revenue for the firm. That is your job. But more specifically, your job is to squeeze every last possible dollar out of every situation that comes across your desk. Every transaction that you come across, you got to figure out a way to not only make money on it, but make as much money as possible on it without, and this is the managing conflicts piece, without crossing the line or breaking the law, or I should actually say getting caught breaking the law, or basically, pushing the envelope too far. And so I remember working on one of these deals in particular, and this was the partner that was the head of my group, or one of the heads of my group at the time, was very excited about this. He talked about this thing, which was called a quadruple play. And what it was a deal where Goldman was literally working 4 sides of the deal, 4 angles. And I won't get too much into specifics, but suffice to say that this company was getting sold. Goldman was working as the advisor, the sell side advisor. They're making a multi-million-dollar fee on that. Goldman's private equity arm was bidding to buy the company, right? My group was arranging the financing, the debt structure, basically to fund the acquisition. And the commodities group, the swaps group, had put together this elaborate hedging mechanism, because it just happened to be that this particular company was in the paper business, and they had, commodity price inputs. And so they wanted to reduce the risk of the fluctuation in price of those inputs so they could secure their profitability. Okay, so Goldman was literally playing 4 sides of the deal. It reminds me a little bit of my actual favorite book. This is Catch 22. I don't know if you guys know this book, but there's a scene. It's a dark comedy about World War II, but there's a scene where there's this court martial and there's this hapless, enlisted guy in the army, basically, and he's deployed in Europe. And he's been, someone's leveled an accusation at him. And he has, so that you got the board that's basically prosecuting him. And then he's got, a defense attorney, basically. And then there's essentially a judge that's going to, basically render a verdict. And the same guy is in all 3 seats, right? It's the judge, jury, and executioner deciding this guy's fate from multiple angles. And that's what Goldman was doing, at least when I was there. And what's interesting is law firms, okay, big corporate law firms, they're big players in the money game, the finance game. They don't do this. They are wise enough, and I think at least in the history that I'm aware of, to manage conflicts of interest more carefully. They tend to pick one party in a transaction, and they back that party and they work for them, but they don't, take on a third or second client, and a third client, a fourth client that have different interests in the same transaction. And so I've gone on a bit there, so I'll leave it there. But that was sort of my first and initial, exposure to how this machine works and how the very top echelon, the very senior guys, spend their time managing conflicts so as to suck in as much revenue from as many angles as possible.
If I can hop in for a sec, I'd like to go back to the Wayback Machine, but I'll put a little context around it first. I think perhaps like both of you, but at least my experience, when I was in high school, all I wanted to be when I grew up was rich. That's, I didn't really care how, and I had enough exposure to financial markets and stuff like that through just random conversations with my dad or his friends or whatever, that I thought, well, that's the straightest shot there. You deal in money, that's the closest. I guess I actually kind of knew subconsciously, like, that was you're closest to the spigot, right? And so I wanted to go there to catch some of that. And, so in grade 10, grade 11, I was reading security analysis and, all the famous Buffett, Graham, Munger, everyone's books, Fisher. And I thought, this is what I wanted. And I started simultaneously during that time to kind of think, because I didn't have any qualms about any moral quandaries about that business or anything, but I started to kind of like, grade 12, first year out of high school. And, but I still had that inkling, like that dream that I'd had for so long that I've been kind of prepping for. So after university, I went to Shanghai, and my only objective was to get a job in finance. So like, by hook or by crook, I don't care. I got to get my foot in the door. And I end up getting involved in these independent financial advisory firms. And this was kind of the biggest on the scene at the time. They had offices in different cities in China as well as other countries. But as in most emerging markets, at least at the time, I'm not sure what it's like now, these services were relatively unregulated. So what it meant is that they were selling, kind of offshore products from major financial institutions from Europe, or from mostly Europe, not so much the US. But the products were a bit different because of the markets that they played in. But because it was unregulated, what you ended up getting was probably a hyper version of what you might see in regulated markets, where it didn't matter, credentials didn't matter, nor did know-how or intellect, education, anything. What mattered was, can you sell? Because that's the name of the game. And there were no restrictions on who you could find to do that because it was unregulated. So, I'm in a pool. I go in there super green, right? I'm thinking, wow, this is a nice office, marble floors, white leather couches, this Bloomberg on the TV. And I show up, in my suit that I get from the fake market and my phony tie and stuff. And I think, here I am. I'm gonna use all my knowledge and everything I've collected over the years to really do, really make money for the people, the clients that I'm going to serve. And very quickly you realize that is irrelevant. Nobody wants nobody wants your knowledge or anything like that. They want you to develop relationships and sell. And back office, could be in another country, can deal with the strategy and the technical approach and all that kind of stuff. You don't do any of that. And more or less nobody does that, because these products kind of have, a select group of funds, and the firm says, like, these are funds for high risk, medium risk, low risk. You don't need to think anything more about it. You just go out there and sell your damn ass off. And that was fairly jarring, and that's part of the reason why I really didn't like it nor excel in that role, because that's just not me. I can't sit in front of a person and act like I don't care about them. Even if my incentives are pulling me in another direction, it's not me, and I wear it on my face. Like, if I'm lying to you, you're probably going to be able to tell, because my eyes and my facial expressions will be different. So that was my initial experience, and the context I'm providing there. And we can, go back to that later if we want. But Andy, I'm curious, when you first started at Rothschild and then later at Goldman, obviously you had expectations going in. What was the contrast between your expectations and what you were met with when you started in these positions?
That's an interesting question. And by the way, I'm gonna say one thing, which is, definitely most people at both those firms and that I worked with were basically ethical, I think well-meaning people. I mean, they were definitely, driven, and they wanted to make money. Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, they wanted to and were willing to do the right thing. And I think what was interesting was, you mentioned the sort of the sales machine that you parachuted into. There's definitely some of that. I was in a, sort of a different part of the firm that sort of had a different function, and there were other, conflicts and issues. And And actually my function, like I was mostly a spreadsheet jockey.
Right.
So there definitely was some sales involved. And every deal that I worked on or helped with structuring, and putting together had to get sold. A difference is that most of the buyers of that product, I'm talking about junk bonds and junk loans, most of the buyers were institutional. And I think they were a little smarter and had a little better nose, basically for the BS that let's put it this way. It's harder, I think, to get, a clever sales pitch past a portfolio manager, who's running a multi-billion-dollar mutual fund or hedge fund than it is to get a sales pitch, to a retail client.
Sure.
Although I'm putting words in your mouth. I don't know if that was your client base, but so it was a little different. But yeah, in terms of my expectations, I guess that I expected to learn a lot and not have to think about, I shouldn't say not have to think about ethical issues, but not have to worry about bumping into ethical issues. And I think, the conflict of interest situation I described was one element, which sort of the pieces came together. But there were other elements that came to light later, right? There were things that happened that people learned about during and after the global financial crisis that were more concerning. And like there was the Abacus deal where literally, Goldman ended up paying a $500 million fine because they specifically put together, pieces of toxic, mortgage-backed security debt, and they actually missold it. So they lied about what it was. They claimed that, it's just a sort of representative sample of all these assets out there in the market, when actually one of their clients had hired them as a hedge fund, Paulson and Company, specifically to put together, a toxic brew of the worst securities so that fund could take the downside, bet against it, while Goldman's customers, took the other side of the bet. So in other words, and again, that was the mortgage department that did that, but still it was part of the same firm, right? And the bigger story of Wall Street, whether it's Goldman or anyone else, is the industry has paid hundreds of billions of dollars in fines. And I know Princey knows some specific examples of, of some of the chicanery and some of the cases that came out of it. But I guess that I probably assumed that there would be some hard, sharp elbows. I don't want to claim that I was, totally, doe-eyed, had no pretensions of. I'll never forget when this was an interview a few years ago, I think, when Lloyd Blankfein, CEO of Goldman, someone asked him, what his job was. And he said, "Oh, we're doing God's work," right? CEO of Goldman Sachs, "We're here to do God's work." And I think he meant it as a joke, but of course it went viral. I think that I learned that it's a very tricky game that the finance industry plays, and they as I say about the partners, they play the conflicts, they push the envelope as far as they think they can without going over the edge. And the problem is sometimes they go over the edge.
Yeah. And Princey, I want you to jump in, but just on a final point on that, and because I got to give people their due, I don't want to construe that everyone I worked with was like a monster, right? But it really is one of those cases where the incentives drive the behavior that either in hindsight or in the moment is probably not the best behavior. So like when we would go to the pub afterwards, or we go for nights out, or we go for dinner, like many of them were, great, nice, decent people, they're not going to, otherwise very good people. But when your only incentive is to sell as hard as you can and get juice as much as you can from your clients, and you're judged on that, and you're singled out on that, and at the quarterly performance reviews you're either praised or you're in some cases brought down in the dirt if you didn't perform, like that amount of pressure and the level of the incentives just means that all your energy and attention is going to go toward one single behavior. And if that nets a bad outcome, if that behavior is it's hard to judge these things because it's good for the firm, but it's, maybe not as good for the retail investors, but it's the incentives that drive all of this. So, it's been said many times that perhaps we're no better than our incentives, but it's such a, and I'm sure this is the case on Wall Street, it's just so powerful, the pressure to perform, and, both from an organizational level and the incentive, the carrot dangling in front of you is so powerful that, and then the groupthink, you think, well, if everyone else is doing it, then I got cover fire. I can go ahead and do this stuff because it's normal. And those two things put together, and you get that type of behavior.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The analogy, I hesitate to make the analogy, but I'm lying, if I say it hasn't crossed my mind, right? You think about real failure modes in society, right? Like fascism, like Nazi Germany, like, and you think about, well, if it's I don't think all Germans that were living,
Right.
in the 1930s in Germany were evil. In fact, I think most of them were probably just people. And yet you get that kind of an outcome. And again, not to equate Nazi Germany with Wall Street, but it is illustrative of the fact that with the wrong incentives and with the crowd, playing along, yeah, you can get, let's say, suboptimal outcomes. And the incentives, as you say, that in most cases, we're only as good as our incentives. And if you put if you compare a person's reputation to a system's reputation, and you put the person in the system, it's probably the system's reputation that will endure rather than the person's, unless you get out.
Daniel?
Yeah, agree with everything you guys have been saying so far. What do you call it, Andy? The Weinberg machine or something? Is
The
that
Wayback,
right?
the Wayback machine.
The Wayback machine.
Go way back.
I'll give you the Wayback. Holy crap! And it's kind of a warning, really, to those that truly believe that you've got to get the degrees and the undergrads and whatever else to get into this game, because I didn't, and I know hundreds who didn't as well. I mean, for me, growing up, my dad was always worked at a bank, and across different products, but ultimately in the end in foreign exchange. And I had grown up, swearing to never follow in his footsteps. No way am I doing that. I wanted to be, I don't know, like, I think like most kids, a policeman or a fireman at one stage. And then towards when it was getting to like go time, I was thinking, landscape gardening or something, be outside. I just wanted to be outside. I did not want to be chained to a desk. I'd seen my father be chained to a desk, his whole life, his whole career in the end. But yeah, you just get pulled in at the age of 19. I was done with academia. I couldn't do another day of school. Like the thought of even applying for university was just not on the cards. And a call came in from a friend of his in the business, who knew me well and knew I was at like 19 years of age and probably looking for a job, and said, well, does he want to come and, trial out on the desk? And that happened to be the foreign exchange spot dollar mark desk in London, which was the busiest market by far of any market at that time. So, of course, up I went, like John, in like the crappiest suit from Marks and Spencer's that you're ever gonna buy, and walking in thinking, what's this all about? And this was 1995, and I had to be present on the desk by.
Wait, sorry to interrupt you, Princey. If we're going back to 1995, I have to crank the Wayback Machine a little farther back. Here we go. Okay, all right, go.
Okay. So yeah, I turn up. I had to be present on the desk and ready to go between 6 and 6:15 a.m. And I turn up, bright-eyed, and what's this job all about? And get introduced to the other trainee, who was going to be, kind of shepherding me through this world of big finance. He put a notepad and a pen in my hand, and he said, right, you start with that ginger guy. They were all sitting in a circle, right? Dollar Mark, spot brokers sat in a circle, and they had a microphone and they had speakers in front of them. And each button that they could press, they could speak directly to a squawk box. And they had a light. If they had the best bid in the room, they turned on the orange light. If they had the best offer in the room, they turned on the green light. So everybody knew where the price was at any time. And it was just, when it booted off, it was just electric. It was very, it got the adrenaline running. But anyway, notepad, first morning, notepad, pen. You start at the ginger guy, you end at the gray guy. Just ask them what they want for breakfast and move on. I'm like, okay, this is big finance, right? Here we go. First guy, hey, good morning. Good morning. Like, what the fuck do you want? Like, I'm Dan. I'm the new guy. He's like, you gay? What? No, I don't think so. What would you like for breakfast? Marmite and toast spread evenly to each and every corner of the bread, and I want the bread brown and warm to a minimum of 32 degrees, and a black coffee. Thank you very much. Okay, I write that down. I go to the next guy. I look at him. I interrupt him because they're just sitting there. They're just squawking numbers, right? 6'8", 6'8", excuse me, 6'8". What the fuck do you want? I'm like, I'm the new guy. I would like to take your breakfast order. Okay. Have you ever seen a grown man naked? What? But at that point, I twigged because I had grown up with my dad watching all of the old classic movies, and I just hit him straight back with the next quote from Airplane. And that was where that quote was from, that film. And I think it was, I just was, no, but I like gladiator movies. And it was like, bam, right, you're passing a test. Okay, I would like, first of all, from the newsagent, a packet of cigarettes, and I would like this, and I would like this. So I went around like 9 orders of these guys, and then met with the other trainee. I'm like, right, I think I got it all. He's like, don't worry, I know it all off by heart anyway, but that's like first test. So we go down, and as we're going down, he passes me some car keys. He's like, can you drive, by the way? I'm like, yeah, I can. He's like, right, okay, well, we're going to have to go drop the breakfast orders and then go get the cars off and we've got to have the cars off by 7:30. Otherwise, the guys get fined. And then I tell you, it's hell to pay. I'm like, okay. So we drop our orders off at the local sandwich shop. And then we walk around to Finsbury Circus, where these two identical, except one was blue and one was green. I don't know, these must have been Bentleys from the 70s. Massive things, right? The only thing I'd ever driven was like a Vauxhall Corsa and with stick shift, right? This thing, it was like driving a front room. I'm in London. I've never driven in London before. It's one of these weird stick shifts you have on the steering wheel. I think you have them in the US. I'd never seen one in my life.
Yep.
So he's like, right, just follow me. So we go off and park this one guy's car way over off, miles and miles away near Brick Lane. And then I drop that one off and I jump in with him. And then we go and park his car on the Liverpool Street Station. Then we go and get the breakfast. Then we take everything upstairs. Then we hand it all out. And I'm thinking, geez, what is going to happen next? And so the day goes by and I'm just sent for coffees every 5-10 minutes. Or Snickers bars, or oh my God, I don't even want to tell you what happened when scratch cards became a thing. You were just a total dog's body, and you would take dry cleaning, you would take shoes to get mended. I pretty much knew every single one of their ATM cards, their PIN numbers, because they would just give me their PIN card, their cards. Go and draw me out 150. I'm going out tonight. Go and draw, blah blah blah. I would go and do that. I'd put bets on for them. I would go down to the local, if they got a tip from a cabbie on the way in the morning on a horse race, that was it. The whole desk would pile in. I would have to, in the height of summer, I would have to go down in this long, great big Mac and have every pocket I had stuffed with different rolls of cash and different names. It was just a nightmare. But you were a
gopher.
A total gopher. Total gopher.
I don't know if people know what gopher means anymore.
No,
tell them. You know what it means.
this is go for life. And this would have been if I'd have spent 3 to 4 years at university, right? This, that's the opportunity cost of going to university if you're looking to get into this game. I mean, the banks insist on it. They used to. I don't know whether they still are. I think we're probably moving away from that now. But on the brokerage side, if you could stand that test, it was like boot camp. Anyway, I'll finish off the first story, because at the end of the day, we had to reverse the process of getting the cars. And this was on my second day. The other trainee and I, it got to like 4:30, 4:45, and we knew the guys, the two directors, would want their Bentleys on Finsbury Circus ready for them to get home to their families, right? So we went down to the Liverpool Street Station. We would get into the car park. We'd get into the blue Bentley, and the other trainee would drive me all the way to Brick Lane. I would jump out, pick up the other Bentley, and I would follow him back, because I still didn't know my way around London, right? Second day, no chance. On the way back to Finsbury Circus, this dickhead, he decides it'd be pretty funny to try and, lose me along the way, and started playing a few games and started speeding up around the back streets of London. And I remember vividly that we were coming down to Bishopsgate, straight back towards Liverpool Street Station, and he had gunned it. He was trying to make the lights so he could get through the lights before me, and I would get caught. So I'm like, there's no way I'm falling for that. So I gunned mine as well. And then I saw he got caught. So he's now first at the lights, caught on the red light. And I was like, thank God. I don't know whether I've turned left or right. God knows. We didn't have mobile phones, right?
There's no Google Maps.
No. So he gets caught at the lights. So I take my foot off the accelerator and I start pressing on the brake. But the car keeps getting faster and faster and faster. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what the fuck is going on right now? It got to the point where I was hanging, my bum was off the seat. I was hanging on the steering wheel. I had both feet on the brake pedal, full tilt on the brake pedal, my whole weight, fighting the fishtailing that was going on. The smoke coming out of the back wheels going everywhere, bearing down on this other director's Bentley, about to total the pair of them on my second day. So in the end, I just turned off the ignition and I stopped about a yard, a meter behind the bumper of this other guy's car. He gets out of the car. He comes marching around. He yanks the car door open. He's about to yank me out of the car because he just thought I was fucking about. But he could see I was just like completely white as a sheet and just trembling. And he's like, what happened? I'm like, it wouldn't stop. The car wouldn't stop. He's like, all right, chill out. What did you do? And I just turned the ignition off. He's like, okay, fine. So he knocked the thing into neutral. He turns the ignition on, and this thing made the biggest bang you've ever heard in your life, right? These are like, kaboom. And these are post like IRA bomb days in London and stuff, right? People are not impressed when that shit goes down. People are on tenterhooks. It turned out the accelerator cable had got stuck when I'd floored it to get after him. And God knows how he knew how to unstick it, but he opened the bonnet and he put his finger in. He's like, right, fine. We'll just creep around to Finsbury Circus. We put the cars on the meter. We went back upstairs, gave the keys back to the directors, and didn't say a word. So I was probably 1 meter away from never actually entering the financial services in any shape or form if I'd have gone back with the car keys and 2 totaled Bentleys.
That's a great story. And it brings back to my mind, because you forget this stuff because it was so far back, so way back, which is, in the first few days on the job, whether you're coming in, at any level, basically, you really don't know what the hell's going on. You're sucking it all in. You're trying to not screw up. You're desperately trying to not screw up. You're like, this is my ticket, for some reason, this place where they mint all this money is willing to invite me in the door. I got to not blow this chance. And I actually remember living it was, it ebbed and flowed, but there was definitely fear. There's definitely plenty of fear in the experience, at least, in the first couple of years, because of what you described. You never know what some senior guy is going to say. You never know when some mid-level guy is going to pull a prank on you, right? Or, the guy that knows he basically can screw with you and knows that you don't know the ropes yet. I never was at risk, I don't think, of actually crashing a vehicle and potentially, injuring myself or others. But there's definitely that's definitely part of the culture, or was part of the culture at the time. I love that story, man. That's a great story.
Yeah, it's true. You go in, and what I fear, and what I've seen repeatedly is, kids walk in, they're 24 years old, they've got the MBA and whatever else, and they want to go in and they want to add value, like immediately. It's like, this is what I want to do. This is what I've studied for. This is what I've been through the economics and, sold myself down the river for, and got 200 grand's worth of debt to be in this seat. And the first thing you ordered to do is go get a coffee and a sandwich for someone. And you got a 43-year-old knuckle dragging futures trader sitting there, like, he sees you as a threat. He's going to do the utmost to make sure you do not excel. You do not show him up. Like, if you start cranking out spreadsheets that he can't even, with pie charts and Venn diagrams and all, he's like, what's he going to do? He's going to quash you as quickly as he can. And this is why kids coming in, they get disenchanted with the business very, very quickly.
So how far did you go, Princey? Like, I presume that you became one of those people whose order was taken at some point. Yes. Number one, how did you deliver that order? Did you become the monster, or did you have a little bit more, empathy when you were giving your orders? And, take us to the point where, you decided that, basically what I'm asking, how far did you go into it? How much did it kind of take over your behavior and your mind and your attitude? And then what was the point at which you decided, this isn't working for me?
Yeah, I mean, I spent 18 years in total in the business, and for the first 3 years, it was that hell. It was that, and finally got the break when I had to go and cover for someone in Singapore, because the desk was short one or two guys, and nobody in their London office would even consider going. This was 98, and Singapore wasn't even really heard of, and London was the center, right? It's like, I ain't going over there. That's ridiculous. Like, London's where it is. Right. But I did go over there, and I ended up getting hired full time. And to your point, John, yes, I did become one of those guys that got the seat at the desk, got the shot at the big time, and started talking to the big accounts and started making the relationships. And like you said earlier, all you're there to do is make relationships. That's it. You make relationships, and by hook or by crook, and you take them out for dinner. You had the expense account. You take them out for dinner. You take them out for drinks. You play golf with them, whatever it is, whatever their bent is. You do that. You build a relationship with the hope that they're going to do business with you.
Details to remain sketchy for the moment, right? I like how you said whatever their bent is. We'll just leave it at that, right? Right, Princey?
Well, I don't want to go. Yeah, we've all seen the films.
Yeah, exactly.
Lauren may be listening someday.
Sorry to interrupt. I had to bust your balls a little there.
Of course,
it's part of the business. Of course,
exactly. It's nothing I've not known, Andy. But yeah, John, I never wanted to be that dick that was, just sending people down. I would pull the odd prank for sure, but it was always in good faith. And I hope if anybody that worked under me ever listens to this would attest to that. But I really didn't see the point in that kind of behavior. The people that did it would tell you, it's to toughen you up, it's to make sure that we know that you're good enough for the business, and you're going to stand the test of time. One of the tests, like your first week, they'll just take you out and try and get you as drunk as possible. And, you're going to puke at the bar and, make a show of yourself in front of the customers, or can you hold your own? I mean, this is like, it's like it's fraternities.
It's
Yeah.
hazing. It's frat hazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Did I answer your question there, John? Was there anything else?
Well, I also was kind of interested in when you decided to extricate yourself from that situation. And the funny thing about it is hazing, what you just described, but it's also training. Like you have to become that person. Like I'm sure you've been out on many of these relationship building occasions where, on the forefront, you're going out, you're getting smashed, having a good meal, you're doing whatever else. You're building that relationship. But there's a perspective behind the surface level where you're like, okay, like exactly what's going on here. There's a tether from your intention to kind of the outer look. You're like, okay, we're getting smashed, and then tomorrow morning I'm going to do this, and this is this, and so they were kind of, even though it seems like kind of a crude method of training. I mean, that's a skill that the system rewarded, and so they treated you that way, and then you went on to treat others that way, and that's what's interesting about this on a systemic level is like, and of course it's not just a system, that's human psychology, that's how people make decisions, whatever, but it's interesting that the system breeds, I guess, that type of behavior. But when did you start getting the inkling that like, or why did you leave, I guess is the real question.
Yeah, 18 years in. Great fun in the early days. Not the first one, even the first 1 to 3 years. It was fun to a certain level, even though you were just the gopher. But then when you got your shot and you started making inroads and you felt as though you deserved it, it was kind of like this self-reinforcing loop. And then that just kind of like dies away, I guess. It's one of these businesses that just takes something from you, to kind of like in a very, very small, drippy way. It's like dollar cost averaging, like, your soul out of you. And it got to a point where I was like, this is never going to change. I got in 2012 to when I was still in foreign exchange, and I turned my computer on like the 2nd of Jan. And I was like, another 10 to 20 of this, like, can that be? And the twins had just come along, so we were now 4 kids deep, and I was like, I had all the bills running through my head, the back of envelope math didn't work out, nothing worked out, like nothing at all, like. And then within 2 or 3 days, my direct manager at the time told me that he'd been called into one of my big accounts and was told that he's going to be taking over the account now because this, that, and the excuse was complete bullshit. And I'm like, you know what? I'm so done with this now. I can't be bothered to fight these battles. And I went and transferred. I took 9 months to extricate myself from the business. I transferred across. I did commodity markets for the last year or so. And that's when I picked up the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And that turned my head upside down, and that turned my mindset upside down. I'm like, you know what? I think I've sold my soul to the devil long enough. I got 4 kids I don't see. I'm a lodger in my own home. I've painted myself into this corner. I'm working for a company I don't even respect. I'm being forced to buy their stock through RSUs. And I see the inner workings of this company. I would not buy this company for the life of me, but you're forcing me through. And not only that, that was all a new structured deal, and sweetened by the fact that, well, the only way we can keep you on, this was across the board, right? After 2008, the only way we can keep any of you on is if we restructure this way, and then we can build the company. It was like basically the start of the buyback season, and nothing sat well anymore. And I was like, nah, this is just so conflicting with who I am and what I want my kids to see me as. And I was done. It's
a funny story, because my exit story is something very similar, although it happened perhaps more immediate. I went into work one day. I was unsatisfied, dissatisfied for a while, but I had no plans of walking away that day. I put my suit on, go to work. and my like manager, a team leader, whatever you call him, was in town that day because I was in Beijing at the time, and he was up from Shanghai, and he sits me down for our weekly, Monday meeting, and I don't know what, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, didn't eat my Wheaties. I don't know what it was, but he sat me down and said, how are things going? And I was like, and they weren't going well because I was not performing well because I didn't want to almost, I just wasn't into it. And he was, how are things going? What's give me the update. And I was just like, it's not going great. And he was like, oh, well, tell me more what's going on. I was like, I just don't like, I'm not into it. And he kind of went like, well, what does that mean? And I kind of looked around the room and I was like, I think I'm done with this, man. I think I'm done. and you know what? And he was like, are you sure? Have you thought about this? And I was like, no, but I'm pretty sure. And so he was like, all right, well, empty your desk. Empty your desk and leave, and that'll be it. And so, give me, they have access to my email server and stuff. And he was like, we'll handle all the client turnover. You can, basically fill up your box and get out. And I did. That's how it ended for me. Very unceremoniously.
Come on in, Andy.
I like that.
What's the exit?
I like how you just knew, right? There was some part of your brain, some part of your mind that just like knew. I mean, most people would say it was your heart, but I'm always thinking about the the prefrontal cortex analytical piece, and then the more base layers, the emotional,
Well, Andy, the thing is like, I wonder, had he not been there for a face-to-face and it was just our regular call, would his questions have kind of landed the way they did? Because, my probably fault, and, it's a blessing and a curse, is I'm kind of brutally honest with myself and with anybody who, asked me a direct question. So I wonder if I wasn't forced to articulate precisely how I was feeling at that time with someone face to face, would it have landed the same? And would I have just gone through the normal Monday call, like, things are okay, blah, blah, blah. He's not around to really know how things are going. So I click and just go about my business. But, there it was, he asked me a direct question. I answered, and then we were both kind of like, that's probably not a good answer.
There was just you just had the inertial motion, and he just provided the bump that you needed.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's useful. This is the story of a lot of people in the business, and I'm speaking in general, which is they think it's exciting. They've got some sort of fuzzy but attractive ideas about, I don't know, it's going to make me rich, or it's going to give me access to new opportunities, or there's just some cool mystique, some aura about it. And no doubt, it'll be a good paycheck for now. And, there is that promise of the big payout, right? There is the partnership at Goldman, $8 million a year. At least that was the statistic when I was back there, right? And, but then you get, and I think you were, Princey, I think you were maybe alluding to this, which is, you get the overhead, all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe you are buying a couple of those, Bentleys that you had to park. Maybe you do have, a few kids, and, you got to put them in private school because that's just what, Wall Street guys do. And you got to get the nice house, and you got to get the, the expensive golf club membership because, it's this fiat driven consumerist culture. And pretty soon, even though your income is high, this is for the majority, right? I mean, yes, if you truly make it to the 8 million a year, let me tell you, I think although those guys find a way to spend it, I think I would struggle to spend 8 million a year. But I guess lucky for me, I don't have that problem. But but for the for the rest of the army that supports those generals, you get into this. It's having quote unquote high income, with the cost structure that comes with it and the spending culture, it's easy to find yourself on a treadmill, very quickly. And it's easy, therefore, you think about the inertia. There's either the, oh, I've just done this for however long, and so I guess I'll just keep doing it. Or there's the, well, if I don't do this, what's the alternative? What's my opportunity cost? What's the thing I'm going to do? And is that going to support, the lifestyle to which I or my family have become accustomed? And that's also a dangerous trap.
It is, man. I know exactly what you're talking about. And you do, there's two things at play. You paint yourself into the corner, and the sunk cost is huge. Like, that's all the shit you went through to get that seat, and you're going to walk away. You're just going to give it up because someone's pissed you off, or like, it's, but if you don't, like, opportunity cost is a perfect analogy. It's it's.
And here's what. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how do you want to measure success? That's what you got to ask yourself before you kind of make any kind of decision, I suppose. Because you both probably felt this hugely when you stepped away. Like the loss of identity was, for me, it was massive. It was like huge. It was like, crushing almost. I couldn't now say I was a foreign exchange broker. I was, and that had been my shtick for like 17, 18 years. Now I was an unemployed bum with 4 kids and an irresponsible parent taking my kids out of formal education to go swanning off around the world. Who the hell do you think you are? Like, it's tough. And I don't know whether you guys felt that as well when you walked away. Like, how did you handle that loss of identity?
Well, you
go first, John?
yeah, mine's quick, but you point to an interesting point, which I want to touch on too. But I never identified with the job, so it was a nothing for me. When I left, it was a massive monkey off my back, and I was just like, kind of free. But it does point to how insidious this ultimately behavior becomes, because, as you say, like this work and becomes such a kind of ingrained in who you are, that's another reason why it's hard to leave. That's another reason why there's so much buy-in. That's another reason why there's so little. It's so unquestioning, that this is me. This is what I do. How could, and so many people relate the two to each other. I'm not a bad person, therefore what I do cannot be bad, sort of thing. And I think, not to generalize across the board, but because I wonder why a lot of people in the legacy system, or I don't wonder, but I like to think about the different reasons why, they don't question their behavior more, the system they engage in more, the impacts of the system at large that they're engaging in, other solutions that may be outside the purview. Like, it's very kind of horse blinders on. And, I think that's part of the reason, because it's become such an ingrained part of you, it makes it more difficult to question. Because what are you going to question? You don't, are you going to question yourself? I think a lot of people probably don't do that until maybe you actually do get ripped apart from it, and you get ripped a little bit bare, and you got to say, well, what am I if I'm not the Forex trader Daniel? And I think that's ultimately a very healthy thing, because we are the stories we tell ourselves, and the more convicted and the more confident and comfortable you can be with your story, probably the better happy and successful your life is going to be. Because when you were just saying that just then, I was thinking, because you said loser Dan, no job, took kids out of school, and I get that's probably part of you was like, that's how people are perceiving me right now. I'm sure you had a bit more of a stronger compass at the time, otherwise you wouldn't have made those decisions. But when you were saying that, I was like, man, that sounds fucking awesome. This guy, got out of this thing that he hated, this soul destroying work that ultimately, probably shouldn't even exist, currency, exchanging ultimately, especially in the Bitcoin paradigm. and he's taken his kids out of this ridiculous industrial schooling system that we have in order to ingrain them with better values, better education, different perspectives on things. Like, what a legend, but it's all about perspective and what we tell ourselves. And I think the stories that the people that are still caught up in all that tell themselves is one of the prime reasons why it's so intoxicating, because without that story, what are you? And that's a far bigger fear, perhaps, to some, than just not having a paycheck come in for a few months until they sort things out.
See, John, I knew you would cut to the heart of it like a knife, which is why I was so stoked to have both, to put this together with both you guys. And I think, I'll put in my 2 cents too, which is, at one end, you've got, John, you figured out relatively soon, that this just wasn't you, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And partly, or maybe largely, because of, ethical reasons. And then Princey lived in the belly of the beast for a while, but he ultimately made a decision and got his freedom. I, started working at banks, and then I worked, on the investment side, on what they call the buy side, which is not, on the sell side in the banking system, but it's adjacent to it, right? And it's very interlinked and interdependent and incestually, involved, right? You work at a private equity fund, you work at a hedge fund, you work at most any investment fund, you are doing business with the banking system and Wall Street on a daily basis. And I was lucky that I could move into an adjacent area of finance, which is wealth management, which is actually the same business that made John vomit ultimately. I am fortunate enough to work in a structure where I'm a fiduciary. I make a percent of assets. Basically, that's how I make my money. And so I don't get paid to sell. I do get paid to sell. Everybody gets paid to sell, right? I get paid to sell if it means, bringing on a new client and bringing in new revenue, or if it means convincing, a client to move more of his or her assets to me, except for usually I am managing primarily, all of the assets anyway. But no business is unconflicted. And so, I count myself lucky to work in a part of it where at least I can sleep at night. I'm not going to say I'm any kind of saint. I mean, I'm still a toll taking, rent seeking, I take a percent of assets, and I can imagine the world we've all imagined where if I just wanted to save and sound money, well, then I'd have less. I wouldn't have to go chase return, by owning this portfolio of return, at least so far, return delivering assets. I'm talking about as just an individual now, not as the wealth manager. I wouldn't have to hire me, right? So to speak. Right. It's a mixed bag. I mean, I do, in my transition personally, I used to work for faceless institutions, basically. Now, at least I get to work with people, which is more fun for me. And because I'm not trying to, jam them and sell them, proprietary product that I get a percentage of, that makes me much, much more comfortable. But it's definitely various gradations. I mean, there's different levels and parts of this legacy financial system, and some are more corrupt than others, and some induce more bad behavior than others, or have more conflicts than others. And so in one sense, I've moved more toward the periphery. But in the other sense, I still have 2 feet in it. And I am maybe like you guys, trying to explore this world of Bitcoin, trying to help, trying to understand it myself, first of all, like we all are, and then trying to help others understand it and see where it goes.
Yeah. Andy, I think, to what you just said, a lot is made because I think a Bitcoin world will disrupt a lot of this industry that we've all been a part of, right? Like, and again, in particular, Daniel, in the currency world, like obviously if we have one global currency at some point in the future, then we're not going to need trading desks between currencies, right? That will just be gone. And as you said, Andy, like the ultimate rent seek is that, just because of that you are the toll between changing one current piece of paper effectively for another, you get to take a cut of that, and everyone outside of that kind of loses. Hopefully that goes away, and rightfully so. But there's still going to be obviously many instances where, if you're a professional in one domain, you specialize in one domain, and you accrue surplus as a result of that, and you want to generate yield, then you may very well want someone who can help you with that, an expert who has the knowledge and the time to do that on your behalf because you're busy accumulating wealth in another area. I don't think any of us have a problem with that. And, I think what Bitcoin is just going to do is necessitate everyone upping their game, right? Because, some people say, oh, well, why would people invest in a deflationary currency? It's like, well, because they'll want more yield. Like, yeah, it's great if Bitcoin is 1%, 2%, whatever deflationary as it may be, your purchasing power increases without much work in the currency. Well, that's wonderful. But that doesn't mean that everyone in the world is going to be satisfied with 2% or whatever it is a year. Some people are going to want to take more risk. Where are they on the timeline or the arc of their life and career? There's all these different considerations that, like, economic calculation is still going to happen, and ambition is still going to drive people, and greed will still drive people. It will just all be tethered or conform around a far healthier system, so that the incentives are better aligned between everybody that's playing in this game. So, I think your profession in particular, Andy, will persist. And, I think in your particular case, I think it's great that we have people like yourself in that old world that are able to get the message across to people that won't listen to anybody but, right? Like some people that you deal with, they're not going to listen to me. Oh man, he left the industry long ago. Now he's a bum. Like what, they're not going to listen to Daniel. They're not going to listen to, any of the podcasters or personalities, because in their mind, this type of knowledge comes from a very specific channel, and you uniquely represent an opportunity to get the message through that channel. And so, I always advocate or say that there's so many different doorways into this, and there's so many unique perspectives, and they're all valid, and we should all do our best to express them, because different people listen to different people, different perspectives, and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's good that we have kind of like a covert agent in you in the legacy system, but who is obviously talking about Bitcoin, and who's introducing clients to Bitcoin in a manner that perhaps few of us could do in a similar way.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Andy, what you're doing. But I don't think did we hear your exit story, Andy? Because I'm not sure we did. And I remember, I'm sure there was like, didn't you get in super early one morning and just take a shit on Paulson's desk and walk out? Like,
that's exactly what I did. No, man, look, this is what I was sort of dancing around earlier. And by the way, you guys are kind. I like to think I'm a secret agent too, and hopefully I'm not a double agent. But the truth is, I try to present myself as what you described, which is like kind of the bridge, or one of the doing my tiny small part to be a bridge between the legacy and the new. And I'm still learning, and, I'm doing whatever I can, but yeah, as far as, jumping out, I never jumped out, right? Like, you're like, what's your exit story? And my answer is, well, like, I'm kind of still in, right? I never got out. Yes, I went from the belly of the beast investment bank to private equity, which is, where a lot of people, they leave investment banks, they go work for private equity, and they still do a lot of business together. And, private equity industry doesn't exist without the whole debt funding, leverage loan, junk bond, system that feeds that feeds the private equity beast. And then I went to work, at a hedge fund, which is more public markets, but, still intimately involved. And then, yes, I went to work with my family firm, and do wealth management. So there were sort of steps along the way, but, was there ever, I'm still, it's still my full-time job. I mean, yeah, I'm taking, a long lunch here basically to talk to you guys, but that's still what I do. So, it's an area where I'm comfortable enough with the incentives, and the ethics of it. But, I'm still a toll taker, right?
Are you
I never got out.
Is your title like CRPO, like Chief Red Pill Officer at your firm?
Well, look, as you know, since you asked, now I'll use the shill opportunity, right? I did take on one title for Swan Bitcoin, which has an auto stacking, system to basically suck fiat money out of your bank account, put it straight into Bitcoin, and then also automatically push it into cold storage, and so that's that's one title I have as head of institutional for Swan. But yeah, as far as my activities in my primary job, my day job, yeah, I'm just no doubt I'm trying to red pill as many people on the institutional asset side as possible, because as you well know, that's a call it $10 trillion of assets, right, are for better or worse directed by guys like me, wealth managers who do portfolio allocation and asset allocation. So yeah, I am trying to red pill one by one. Sunday night I was on the beach with Brecky von Bitcoin, and his dad. He's been working on his dad for I don't know, years now probably. And so he surreptitiously set up this meeting and parachuted me down into Venice, and I gave him the spiel, and I gave him a copy of the book and signed it for him, and yeah, I think maybe we got him over the hump, but yeah, it was sort of a special ops maneuver, and I don't know if it worked, but I'm trying.
In your circles, in your network, I asked you this question, I'm sure, when we did our original podcast together. But the answer might have changed now. I know you kind of avoid the cocktail parties and whatever else and the networking with other wealth managers, and but I'm sure from time to time, obviously not in the last 2 months, there's whispers in the wind, or there'll be an odd phone call, or there'll be a gathering of some sort. Are you still like that weird Bitcoin guy that's still trying to shill his customers down the line, and they're kind of looking at you suspiciously? What's the vibe? Like, it must be weird.
So I'm going to be on. So honestly, and this is one of the interesting things that we ask ourselves every day, right? I got my day job, and then the question is, how else do I want to spend my time, right? Well, there's family, obviously. I got 2 kids. But I also want to spend my time on Bitcoin. Okay, how do I do that? And what you said is actually accurate. I have spent almost no time sort of interacting, mingling, directly, networking with others of my peers, let's say in the business. Every free minute I have, I am instead shilling my book, doing podcasts with you gentlemen, trying to get the word out there. And part of it is I sort of I don't want to say made a decision, but I had a little bit of a realization, which was, okay, if I want to get the word out about this book, it would be great to sort of get it adopted or get interest in the Bitcoin community, as well as, what you described, which is, try and infiltrate, the legacy system. And one of the ways to do that has been actually work with some of the, Bitcoin product producers who are trying to serve the wealth management community, which, by the way, we're trying to do at Swan also. We're, developing products in that regard. And so that's been a little bit of my surreptitious angle, or my sneak attack is, getting on, webinars, doing educational sort of town hall discussions of Bitcoin is, hey, look at this, look at this strange specimen over here, this Andy Edstrom guy. He's a legacy finance guy, wealth manager who, wrote a book about Bitcoin. Like, what kind of weird anomaly is that? And so it's been a little bit of that. but it's interesting. Sometimes I ask myself, oh, should I go evangelize? I don't know if evangelize is the right word, but like, should I go, should I be more involved with the wealth management community? And it's something I'm considering, trying to make happen is spending a little time. And I don't know if that's, trying to get a speaking spot at conferences. That's probably the highest leverage, angle is regular way wealth management or finance conference. Can I get on the docket there? I've gotten on the docket for, Bitcoin, conferences, but I think that would be maybe the way to go about it. But if you have any ideas in that regard, I'm all ears.
Well, the first thing we need is like conferences to mass buy your book and leave them on people's chairs. So we can
airdrop.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you guys are great, doing great work. You guys are getting the word out there. I don't know who your audiences are. I imagine it's more Bitcoin enthusiasts. I mean, I enjoy all the stuff you guys put out. I mean, Vallis will tell you that I was chasing him down to do his pod whenever we did it, I think, a few months ago. And Princey approached me and was very persuasive, and I'm really glad you did it. So, I don't know. I guess I'm hopeful that another angle is these regular way finance pods, and there's some of that where they're bringing on Bitcoin guests. I mean, there's guys like, I don't know, Preston Pish or sort of somewhat regular finance adjacent guys that are doing stuff, and I wouldn't mind getting involved in that too.
Yeah, I think the name of the game here is Bitcoin, if we're correct about all of this, is going to be so large, impactful, such a big part of everybody's lives that the real name of the game is what do you enjoy doing the most in this space? What comes naturally to you in this space? And even if you don't have the precise answer right now, like even if you just have an inkling, like that's probably the direction you should start going. And then it's just a matter of, tweaking things along the way. Like, if you wanted to speak at normal conferences and you do it and you're like, that didn't feel right. Or it's like, oh, I got a lot of pushback and I pushed back even harder. And that was great. And like, oh, I think a speaking like circuit, getting on the speaking circuit might be actually something that I really enjoy, that is beneficial for me. Maybe you get paid for it and it's beneficial for the space like that. I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, trying to have like the clarity right at the outset in your set, like this is going to be my thing, is almost impossible. And if it is, well, it's Zeus whining right next to me, but if it is possible, like, guess what I'm saying?
You're good. You're good, man. I can
you hear him
clearly. I can't hear.
Oh, okay. He's making large whining noises. I'll get him out of the room in a second. But anyways, my point is just, it's it seems narrow right now, I think, in many ways, just kind of what's available in the space. And it's up to the people that want it to be more and expect it to be more to broaden it out via their actions and via their interests and kind of aligning with their own truth and creativity. So, but one of the things I did want to ask you.
Sorry, let me cut you off though, because I want to augment that statement, which is, I agree 100%. I'm still learning and trying stuff. I wasn't doing anything on Twitter, 6 months ago. Now I do some stuff, been podcasting. Credit to both you guys. Princey came out of nowhere like a freight train, right? And, has had some awesome guests and has been putting out great content. And you, John, have been experimenting. You were doing you were doing the pod format, and now you're doing the live stream format. And I think this is, all this stuff which you guys are doing. This is what the space needs. Try different stuff, see what's fun, see what sticks. See what gets traction, and experiment. So anyway, I cut you off.
Well, all I wanted to ask was, I first of all, congrats on the head of institutional position at Swan. But what kind of work are you doing? Like, what's the role of approaching institutional clients for an auto stacking business. I know you said they're going to be developing more stuff, but what kind of work are you doing in that capacity right now?
Yeah. So I'm a Twitter bot that just shills Swan. No. So that's actually a part of what I do. I don't want to. There's probably limits to like how specific I can get in terms of where the product's going to go and what it's going to be. Sure. But suffice to say, we're trying to. Now I'm hearing the background noise.
Okay. John, things just needs a pee.
Give me 1 second.
But suffice to say that I am trying to do my small part to help Swan develop and roll out a product that makes it easy for wealth managers to help their clients put money into Bitcoin. That's the short answer.
And I think what we were talking about earlier about people like trying to figure out, how do I enter the Bitcoin space? What are my skill sets? I had no idea I was going to start a podcast like 2 or 3 months ago. No clue. I'm part of a Telegram group, like the Bitcoiner gang, and there's guys in there. They just love making memes. That's it. That's their shtick. Meme the hell out of it. We're going to be in a meme war with mainstream media, and they don't stand a chance. They do not stand a chance, because we have these guys, the creativity that is, John, you were talking with Sabatas last night, like the movies that are going to come out from these guys, it just, they're going to blow people away. And it's going to be, there's different ways you can enter into the Bitcoin space. And I think, what people have to understand is you just do it. You just go for it. And you don't expect anything from it. None of us are getting paid to do this kind of stuff. I
laughed. I chuckled earlier when John was talking about, getting speaking gigs at conferences and maybe making a little money. I'm not expecting anyone to pay me for my conference appearances I've done Andy. so far have been 100% gratis.
it's all free until it's not, baby. It'll come.
As a podcaster, you get the odd affiliate link. I get thrown a few shekels to Shield Coin Floor. Hats off to Obi and the team over there, because they just do that to purely support the grassroots of Bitcoin. That's what they're doing it for. And they, the podcasters, they'll do it for free in most cases. Mm-hmm. But when you get to the higher levels, like Peter and Stefan and Pomp and those guys that have been doing it for a lot longer and have the audience, then you expect the contracts to roll in for the big bucks. But I don't know. How do you feel about that, John? Have you ever thought about that? Like, do you ever want to get tied down to like an exchange or something that's, going to ask you to read out a script or,
Yeah, well, I think we spoke about this once before. I've been approached a few times, and my thinking on it is just that, unless it's a really sweet deal that requires greater thought, I enjoy the freedom of being able to do what I want, but also, not having to associate with a company that, it's not even that they're bad people, of course. It's just like, maybe I just don't really want to associate with it, for whatever reason.
Vallis cannot be bought. Vallis not for sale. Don't even try.
So, and
you've got some good you've got some Bitcoin only Canadian firms out there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know. It's not something I think a lot about right now. And I think that's mainly just because it's not why I started doing it in the first place. And if the time came and someone that I really was, company and a service that I was really into, they wanted to cooperate in some capacity, sponsor a show or do whatever, then I'd look into it for sure. But it's just, I think I said this when we first talked about it. It's just not. I'm more interested in just making the content, having the conversations. I'm not like I said at the time. Nobody's against stacking a few more sats, right? But it's not like a super pressing concern. And so, given that, not that doing so would necessarily mean you have to sell out in any way, but unless it really fits, then why do it? That's the whole point of this medium and the kind of freedom that both this medium and Bitcoin provides. It's like you get to do the things that you want to do, associate with the people that you want to associate with, promote and highlight the brands and services and business and people that you want to do that for, and not do it for the ones that you don't. So,
I'm sure the good people of Canada, they want to use ShakePay, and at the same time, so you shake your ass and some sats fall down, and 10% of sats go to JB, and everyone's happy with that.
Well, I mean, that's I haven't spoken. I know the CEO, but we haven't spoken about that kind of stuff. But I love their service. I really do. I mean, I make to be honest, shaking that phone every day and getting, at the moment I get like 8,900 sats when I shake the phone is the highlight of my day. It's just so exciting to be able to shake your phone and get a few free sats. It's just oddly satisfying. And then I also stack. So I get the double whammy at the same time, which I appreciate. But Andy, what were you talking about before you asked me that question? I had something I wanted to ask you.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I just wanted to say that, to anyone listening or watching, I'm grateful that, that you're willing to spend any time at all, listening to what any of us have to say. The reason that I contacted you two guys about, this idea and having this chat, is because I know you guys are not only some of the least, conflicted. I mean, everyone in this industry, in any industry, has some conflicts of interest, and they're always shilling something. And God knows I do. But you guys, I can tell, are doing it for the love of it. I mean, you guys are learning and having fun at the same time, and helping people learn. So I think that's awesome, and I'm grateful to you guys for doing it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you for what you just said reminded me what I was going to say. But you were talking kind of about that point, and Daniel was saying about I only caught halfway through, but the group of the Bitcoiners who are doing a lot of meme work and that kind of stuff. And it's like, how can you stop something where people are incentivized by something other than the financial return? Or at least that's complementary, because if you hold Bitcoin, then, the work you put into promoting it, strengthening it, et cetera, is indirect compensation and indirect incentive. But, whether it's a group of BTC Pay server, the core devs, Andy, you said to me, you wrote the book out of love, not because you expected to make much money out of it. It's probably at a loss, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the same with podcasting and everything. Like, how can you stop something where the individuals who are engaging in it are so motivated that they're willing to accept the opportunity cost of devoting their time and financial and energy resources to it without direct, financial gain? How can you hope to stop something like that?
Paradoxically, Mises would be, absolutely out of his head, mad at all of us.
That's right. The economists are spinning in their graves.
You guys have missed the whole point. Value your time.
I love that framing. John. I mean, I had a conversation with my wife this weekend, and it was along the lines of, how do I want to spend my time? And the answer is, I want to spend, as I said, I want to spend time with family. Obviously, I want to be with her. I want to be with the kids. I want to do my day job. I want to serve my clients. That's the primary goal. And besides, paying the bills, I also get some satisfaction basically about, around helping clients. But then, if I'm interested in this Bitcoin thing, what am I going to do about it? What's the goal? And the goal is learning more and helping other people learn more and have some fun doing it. As you say, it's not like, I don't know, my cat, including the excellent editing, shout out to Beth Rashbaum and, basically including the help I had with the book. I mean, I'm out of pocket, 5 figures for that. So I'm well short of selling enough copies, basically to even cover my cash costs, forget about the time spent writing it. Right. But yeah, it's, it's a labor of love. and it was gratifying doing it. And like I say, I'm just grateful that anyone's willing to read it. And yeah, it's a passion. It's, as you say, it's something people are passionate about, and you can't, that's hard to beat. That's a force that's hard to stop.
Right.
So can I just jump in then, Andy, and to bring this all the way back to the beginning where we started talking about the Goldman slides. Now,
Sure.
Someone was paid a lot of cash to put that bullshit together. You paid out of your own pocket to put some very deep research together. This is like the dichotomy of the business, right? This is like, what was spat out of, I mean, I don't want to be too hard on the person that wrote that, because they would have probably been, just thrown that on a Monday morning stand up, like, right, you go write a Bitcoin thesis, and I want minimum 15 slides, and there's got to be this, and this, and off they trot and do it.
Yep.
And they're getting paid to do that, and it's complete nonsense. And
try to avoid speaking too favorably about things that we don't necessarily have our fingers in. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, exactly. That was the ultimate. That was the last point, right? Yeah, on the. Yeah, exactly.
The work order.
So yeah, I mean, but what do you think, Andy? Like, when you read that, you and I were straight onto DMs with each other. Have you seen this? Like, have you actually seen this? That the level of non-research that went into it was tangible. And I think they come up with, one slide had four aspects of money or something, and there's like 14 in your book. It's just that I mean, that sums the whole thing up for me, like right there.
Agreed. And I'll tell you, I guess, slight spoiler alert or maybe teaser, but one thing I'm kicking around now is I'm kind of sketching out the idea for an article. And the article, the thrust of it, I don't want to give it away, but the thrust of it is along the lines of, as of a certain point in time, this was a reasonable reaction, right? Dumping on Bitcoin and dismissing it was a reasonable reaction. However, it has become clearer than ever that at minimum, Bitcoin is digital gold and will take share from the gold market. And as that happens, it's going to go up, multiples in value. And not only that, but it's going to be significant market cap. And the framework that I want to apply, and I'm sure others have done it before, but I think it's timely, is there are certain other investments, I won't name particular names, that have driven the total return of the index or a broader portfolio in the last 5-10 years. And having zero allocation to one or a basket of those 15 years ago, like before it was totally clear what the potential was, having zero allocation was the norm as a wealth manager. Today, having zero allocation to certain of those unnamed high performing assets, you're fired, right? Basically, you're out of business if you missed the boat on a certain of these investment names. And that's where I think Bitcoin is going. In other words, I think we're actually at that inflection point where, when I have conversations, when my colleagues, at other firms have conversations with their clients, and they're having to explain why they have zero allocation to Bitcoin, they're going to get fired.
Good luck.
Exactly. And you've been spot on this idea too. I know, Daniel. And now we're actually, I think, at that inflection point. I don't know if that inflection point was, a year ago, or is today, or will be, 6 months or a year from now. But yeah, it's passing. Every day that goes by, it just becomes clearer that having zero allocation to this thing is going to be a real black eye in the future if you're managing someone's money and you didn't put it, put some into it.
It's madness. It honestly is. If you are in the business of managing someone's money, you do not have some kind of tiny exposure to this. It's like you may as well start counting your days, because you're going to get phone calls upon phone calls, like, why the hell? Like, what were you thinking? Why weren't you in it? What were you doing? And people, even if they ask their, I've got a couple of friends now that call me up and they say, oh, I'm going to see my financial advisor and blah, 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 or one particular friend sold out of a company, he's sitting on a handsome amount of pounds, trying my hardest to red pill him. And, he's like, well, I'm going to see the wealth manager at the bank. I'm like, ask him his view on Bitcoin. And I want to know his answer.
And if he doesn't concede, even like if it's a total outright no, then you should run away. Because
that's the litmus test now. For anyone listening, that is the litmus test. If it's just if it gets poo-pooed immediately, they've not put in the work. They're just being lazy. They're not trying. They don't care. It's just like the biggest red flag. It's
we've been talking about the kind of groupthink behavior in the legacy industry that we all spent some time in, and I think you need to be careful to attribute single events when you're looking at complex, dynamic, global, markets. But I think just in that context, Daniel, you were just describing that example, and in your industry, Andy, and actually, I'd love to hear your comments on this. But I think the Paul Tudor Jones move is going to end up being kind of a
watershed
moment for this, because all those other guys who idolize Paul Tudor Jones, all the people on Wall Street in London and Singapore, Hong Kong, wherever, and I knew a lot of them, and I would have these conversations, and it would be so easy to cast me aside because I'm out of the business. I'm a little bit, I'm into unconventional whatever, I'm not your average Joe sort of thing. And, they know how things work. They, that's bullshit. This is the real stuff. And they all just feed into each other's opinions and beliefs on that matter. And so it insulates themselves, and it's hard to penetrate that. But, basically their idol, or one of the titans of the industry, to come out and say, he's obviously not coming out and saying he's a diehard Bitcoin fan. He's just saying it makes sense. It makes sense to have some allocation. You bet on the fastest horse. We look at this over the last 11, 12 years. All of those guys now are going to have cover fire to, whether it's with themselves, with their clients, with their organizations, to say, like, they're not going to so easily shit on each other because, well, Paul Tudor Jones did it.
Yeah.
So what do you call Paul Tudor Jones an idiot? What, are you better than Paul Tudor Jones? No, of course not. So I think that's going to really sway the opinion of those hardline legacy peeps that just ignored it and laughed at it while they did so, and make them, stop, think twice, and then be way more open to the idea of including some in an allocation of some kind.
Yeah, spot on. And I'm just going to riff on that, and I'm going to preview the thing I mentioned I'm working on. And so listen to this. Tell me what you think. So number one, it doesn't generate cash flow. Number two, it's just one competitor among many in the field. Number three, it's a bubble. Number four, not that many people use it. Number five, it's used for crime. Okay, what am I talking about? Of course, I'm talking about it's the year 2005, and I'm talking about Amazon stock. Amazon, one, generates virtually no cash flow. Two, still has plenty of online retail competitors. Three, has suffered a bubble and a bust in which the stock lost over 90% of its value. Four, has only a few million monthly active users. And five, is regularly used to evade tax, specifically state sales tax. Okay. This is the framework, one of many, that I'm applying to Bitcoin today. Wind back the clock. Imagine you're a wealth manager explaining to your client in the year 2020 that you've had zero allocation to Amazon stock over the last 15 years, right? Since 2005. That, I think, some of those, I just gave some examples of, the ways people dismiss Bitcoin today. But I think this is the conversation that people are going to be having with wealth managers, 15 years from now, probably even sooner, probably 5 years from now. And it's the same type of sort of short-sighted criticisms and dismissals of a very promising internet-based, network effect-driven enterprise that's likely to be worth far more in the future than people realize today, and they're missing they're missing the forest for the trees.
Did you see the clickbait article in Forbes today?
No.
Bitcoin goes to $1 million in Forbes today. Dropped.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, it's happening. It's
I think I did. Maybe I did see that one. Maybe I did.
Mainstream media are going to start picking up on this. It's going to start, creeping into what we hope is going to, because, all right, who's the biggest audience for 10 o'clock news?
I don't know. Good question.
Boomers, man. Boomers.
Yeah.
For sure.
I was thinking they're in bed by 10 o'clock, but that's probably wrong.
No, they go to sleep on a couch between 8 and 9:55 and wake up for a cup of coffee and the most negative shit they've ever seen in their lives for 40 minutes and then moan about why they can't sleep. It's the boomers are going to start seeing this shit, right? That it's going to happen. And for Father's Day, my Father's Day gift to my father was Bitcoin for Dummies.
Nice.
I didn't send him your book, Andy. I'm sorry. I just think it's
all right. Next time.
Yeah. The reason why I bought iPhone for Dummies for my mum, because she bought herself an iPhone finally. So, and she was raving about the book. Like, she thought it was a bit of a joke, but now, this is. So now they've got that sitting on the coffee table, Bitcoin for Dummies. And I know at some point over the next 6 months, that angry newscaster on News at 10 between some of the bongs, he's like, Bitcoin, it's new all-time highs. He's like, oh, that's a Bitcoin, that thing that Dan does on the recordings. What
Let me have a look at that book, see what's going on now.
Yeah. Wait, more, please, more accent, John.
I knew I was going to get shit for that.
More John Vallis doing British accent, please. More cowbell.
I'm no Guy Swan doing the voice of an someone from a few hundred years ago, but
that's Brecky, isn't it? That does
when Guy's narrating and someone includes like a quote from Thomas Paine or something.
Yes.
Yeah. I did think the English accent was going to be way better. Clearly, I haven't been in the UK for far too long. But Andy, I'd like to know also from you obviously over the last few months, I presume you've been talking with your clients quite a bit and trying to explain everything that's going on. And nobody has a crystal ball, but do you see us rolling it? Like, I guess, how do you see things from here? And then also in relation to Bitcoin, like, and I presume when you're talking to your clients about Bitcoin, you ask them to have a longer term time horizon, and you're not looking at the next 3 to 6 months or whatever. But in my mind, right now I see two options. We just kind of roar right out of this, COVID stuff, and with all the money sloshing around, we go into a pretty robust recovery, I guess you would call it. The other option, and it seems equally difficult to avoid this one, is that we kind of get the rolling insolvencies over the next 2, 3, 4 months because of all the businesses that have been so affected by this, and whether it's the government lifelines or whether it's their own cash reserves that are just drying up, and so the support is withdrawn, reality comes back to haunt them, and businesses just don't survive. And how much of an impact does that have on the broader economy, markets, Bitcoin, et cetera? What are you telling your clients these days?
Okay, here's my 2 cents. March was pretty hair raising. And April, I spent a lot of time in March and April talking to clients, as you suggested. And obviously, since stocks, and risk assets have recovered a lot, in fact, a surprising amount, in my opinion, it's been less hairy lately, but those were some pretty stressful, 6 weeks or a couple of months there. Okay. The message I've been delivering to clients, and that I still am delivering to clients, is in my 17-year career, I have never felt as uncertain about the future still as I do now. In other words, basically, we try to talk about risk, and we try to draw a probability distribution of potential outcomes, and do scenario analysis and give our best guess, probability weighted, at what's going to happen. And I feel like I can't even draw the distribution. Like, the range of outcomes is just mind blowing. I think most people prefer to have their, advisor have a clear story. Everybody always wants a story. They always want their, advisor or whoever they're relying on to tell them what the future is going to be. And I can't do that. I'm less certain for the future at the moment and in the last couple of months than I ever have been. So that's first disclaimer. Second disclaimer is still I try to think about, scenarios and what you described. How bad will the bankruptcy wave or the insolvency wave be? How much can they mitigate that by just printing tons of money and by the money printer going in, perpetuity and at levels we've never seen, which they've already done and they may continue to do. And so, and then, how bad is the pandemic? Do we get a herd immunity, or do we get a vaccine, and how long does it take? And how much do businesses open up? And do we do testing and we have rolling lockdowns, or people just say, screw it and let it burn? And, has it happened in this part of the world and that part of the country? And I mean, so many unknowns. Against all that, as we know, TikTok, next block, Bitcoin continues to do its thing. And the more of the money printing that goes on, the more people that, the incremental person that listens to this pod reads, that Forbes clickbaity article, picks up someone's, book, whatever, the more people start to say, oh, if they can just print infinite money, why do I pay taxes? What does this all mean? Is modern monetary theory really a thing? So I think you have the ongoing learning and adoption. Obviously, we've had the halving. Historically, that's usually been bullish. I've always been of two minds as a, let's say, investor in Bitcoin. One is, I don't know when it's going to pop, and I don't want to miss those up days. I don't want to miss those green candles, right? Because you never know when they're going to come. And the only thing sadder than an Andy Edstrom who's lost a lot of money investing in Bitcoin is an Andy Edstrom who thinks, he saw Bitcoin and didn't have the exposure and, missed the huge upward move. That's the worst potential outcome for me and also for my clients on their behalf. So I definitely want to have exposure. I don't even try to make timing projections. The pitch and the explanation in terms of the bigger picture to my clients is hard money assets, right? My firm's been around for 30 years, more than 30 years. And until a few years ago, we never had an allocation to gold, right? We were zero allocation to gold for, 28 years or something. And we finally made that step because we saw, the likely resolution of the excess debt and the printing of money. Of course, this was before COVID, which just basically accelerated everything. And so part of that hard money asset allocation, which is its own allocation, its own, bucket now, a key component of that is Bitcoin. And yeah, we take a long view. We think that facts and circumstances about debt and printing of money suggest that hard money assets will do well. Probably Bitcoin will do the best. But we also have, allocations to other hard money assets. And I don't even try to set, the timeline on it. I'm intrigued, and I really want the stock to flow, model to be right. And some days I'm a skeptic, and then some days I look at the chart and I say, it's playing out again. It played out, in the first halving and the second halving, and it just seems to be going in that direction. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's how it plays out. But in the meantime, I'm happy to have exposure myself and on behalf of my clients in the hardest money the world's ever known.
Andy, do you mind if I ask, like, a new client comes in, institution, who a high net worth individual, whatever, and let's say, they've agreed that Bitcoin is something they want as part of their portfolio. And let's say, you do the math and you look at everything and you're like, right, okay, then you need to commit, let's commit 50 grand, just pulling a number out the sky. Do you then just go, bam, let's get into it? Or are you going to use that 50 grand to buy a chunk now and then DCA the rest? What, I mean, because you've got this swan tie-in, and DCA is obviously for the listeners or viewers, dollar cost average, where you buy daily or weekly, or what's the play for somebody that's looking there, because you don't want to miss that green candle day. But
that's a very incisive question, and it actually gets to the heart of what does the right institutional product look like. And my view at the moment is that it's a hybrid of both. It's yes, I want immediate exposure now, because as you say, I don't want to miss that green candle, and I don't know when it's going to happen. But depending on facts and circumstances, I probably want to be accumulating into it over time. So I think it's actually a hybrid. I have my, accumulation, steady accumulation core position piece. And then I may have my component where, depending on facts and circumstances, I'm willing to add, let's say, rapidly, depending on facts and circumstances, or I'm willing to pare it back again, depending on, on where we are. Am I going to hold out forever and cling to every single, Satoshi for every client, if and when it's 18 months from now, and Bitcoin's at 250K? I might be trimming a little, if I'm honest. I still want to have that core position. And if it's made that run, it will then be a very significant part of the portfolio, right? Just by virtue of, going, 10 or 20 or, 50X, whatever the number is. And so then the portfolio management, or the portfolio manager in me, the asset allocator in me, says, okay, if it's become really outsized, I may have to trim it back. But again, that depends on facts and circumstances. It depends on the client's needs. It also depends on, tax treatment. Is this IRA money? Is it, taxable money? So yeah, it's all those things.
Andy, I want to ask you something about that. And gents, I think out of Princey, you're probably getting pretty late over there, so we may want to consider winding this down soon. But Andy, so let's take Venezuela as an example, and just as a little bit of context, I sometimes wonder how much asset allocators, institutions care about sound money at all, right? Because they, why care about preservation of capital when their goal is to actually get yield off of capital, i.e. go into equities or something else, right? So, and when I don't need to do that, I really only need something to transition between 1 and the 2, and at 2, 3, 4, 5% inflation per annum currency is absolutely suitable for that, because I'm not in it long enough to give a damn, right? So, why is sound money of that much import to those types of people? And then when you kind of combine that with the very possible circumstance that at some point in developed markets, we may see something like Venezuela, perhaps not, and hopefully not to the same extent, but as you both know, in Venezuela, crazy inflation over the last number of years and crazy performance in the stock market, of course, right? Because there's, denominated in the Bolivar, or then, the stock market looks like it's doing great. As we know, if you denominate it in gold and US dollars and Bitcoin and something else, it's horrible. But do you think, well, we could even take a slice of what's happening now. Are your clients looking and saying, Andy, I get, what you're saying about, all this money printing going around, but our portfolio is doing great. The stocks are doing great. I don't really want to I don't want to shift things around. Things are working. And if that continues to be the case, if we keep making all-time highs in the stock markets, how much incentive or interest will there be from your clients to, to go towards sound money if it's not evident, what the benefit of sound money really is, and if it even has much benefit?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And this gets to the nub of the investment thesis, at least in my view. And that is, subtitle of my book, right? Why Buy Bitcoin is investing today in the money of tomorrow. And I chose that title with some care, because that is how I view it as an investment today. It is trying to be money. It has somewhat succeeded at being money. but it isn't fully developed, and it's getting there, right? It's on its path. And so what I do say to my clients is, you are investing today in the money of tomorrow. And if it was already established and accepted as hard money, or even the world's hardest money, which I think it has a very good shot at becoming, then it would already be worth gold or whatever, right? It'd already be worth at least 10 trillion. It would be 50x higher than where it is, or more. So that to me is the story. And so, yeah, if stocks do well, I think it will be in large part because of tons of money printing and stimulus from central banks. And that underpins the fact that eventually money will be debased eventually. Again, I agree with you. The dollar is the cleanest dirty shirt. And so, the dollar is not in imminent danger of really devaluing rapidly. I don't think. I could be surprised. That's the longer term story. But yeah, I think in the meantime, there's so many reasons to own and invest in and speculate on this money, this asset that if and when it reaches its potential will be worth many multiples of what it's worth today. And I think that thesis plays fine in an era when risk assets are going up, because I think, this is my view, that the main reason the risk assets are going up so much, the reason they've recovered so much, since the downturn in March, is because of the money printing and is because of that stimulus. And by the way, I'll thinking about another way this could go, because one of the things conversations I have with people is, if Bitcoin price isn't higher, 18 months from now, I'll be surprised, right? Maybe I'll start questioning the thesis, because the world and facts and circumstances really are shining this bright light on the thesis for Bitcoin. But I can imagine a world actually where Bitcoin kind of treads water, for a year or a year and a half. What does that world look like? In my mind, it's the downturn in market scenario, right? It's the stocks are down 30, 40%, from here. We're retesting the lows. It's a prolonged bear market like we had in the early 1970s in the context of sort of stagflation, right? Sort of repeat of the 70s era, or at least rhyming with the 70s era. And in that scenario, if Bitcoin, holds value and holds its purchasing power when most other assets are down significantly, that's actually a pretty good outcome too. So in that respect, it's sort of like multiple ways to win, at least on a relative basis. But yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and when you're explaining that,
you tell me how you view it.
Well, I kind of, if everything keeps going up, I do think that's good for Bitcoin. If we get all these insolvencies and the market crashes again for whatever reason, not that it changes, obviously it doesn't change the thesis for Bitcoin, but there may be liquidation of risk assets because, people need to cover a variety of things. So that could definitely be the case. And I wonder, in the case of Venezuela, if you'd taken, let's say, $100 in 2015, and you'd put it in the stock, or you'd taken 100 bolivars or bolivares, or that currency, you put it in the stock market, or you put it in US dollars, where would you be, today, going back to denominate in the local currency? Are you better off because the US dollar has preserved its purchasing power more than even the advance that you've made in the local currency in the stock market over that time?
I'm pretty confident that is the case.
I am too.
Is exactly right. That yes, if you just put it into the sound money, you'd have been better off.
Yeah. And the last point,
the sounder money.
Yeah, I don't like to refer to the US dollar.
I just called the dollar sound money.
But it's funny. And then Dan, you can like to get your input on how you think things may play out, or the different scenarios. But one of the funniest things about the Goldman slides that they summarize at the end, everything that the slide said. And, they go out, they summarize, Bitcoin is not a real asset, and we don't play in it, blah, blah, blah. And then one of the points out of about 7 or 8 bullet points was no debasement of USD. And I just, I wonder how you could type that, knowing I mean, I guess it depends on how you interpret debasement and inflation, whether monetary or price. But with the government effectively printing trillions of dollars, it seems that's a pretty discrediting statement, in my opinion, to be able to say no debasement in the USD.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
related to that is, what could actually be really bearish for Bitcoin? Well, if we actually had some fiscal rectitude or some monetary rectitude, right? If the Fed said, "Oh, actually, we've taken this too far. We're gonna rein it in a bit," and Congress said, "Oh, maybe printing multi-trillion-dollar deficits annually isn't the right thing to do. We're gonna get the budget back in order." That would be terrible for Bitcoin. Do I think those things are going to happen? Not a chance. And so guys, I apologize. I know I left a question hanging there for Princey. I got to drop. I got a meeting I got to get to, but this has been a blast. It was everything I had hoped and more, and really appreciate you guys putting this together.
Well, it's been
fun. Epic.
Sorry, mate. You go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's been epic. Thanks, Andy, and thanks, John, for hosting. It's been great fun, and I hope adds some value to someone somewhere along the line.
That's right. I have to, just by habit and by instinct, I have to do a 30 or 60-second chill. Of course,
always enough time for that. You
fly by Bitcoin, get it on Amazon. Or Apple, check out Swan Bitcoin, and follow me on Twitter, Edstrom Andrew.
Andy, you're losing your touch. You haven't done your "this is not investment advice," blah 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 blah.
Right. You're right. None of this is investment advice. Everything that Princey said. Gosh, maybe I have lost touch with the regular way financial establishment. I'm forgetting to do these disclaimers and stuff.
I don't know about you, John, but my disclaimer is this is investment advice by Bitcoin.
I haven't been saying that yet, but I think it's fairly clear if you listen to most of my stuff.
It's definitely implied.
Yeah. Andy, it's always a pleasure, man. I look forward to chatting again soon in the future.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, man.
All right.